All right, so now I'm gonna make caprese. This is one of our favorite summer appetizers, and I make this on repeat, especially when we have fresh basil. And so I'm just taking some nice ripe plum tomatoes. These are not from our garden, these I bought at the store. And I'm just gonna cut these about the thickness of the cheese. Now I do save these little ends of the tomato. They're fine, they're edible, and sometimes I'll kind of use them as filler on the plate, but I am just gonna slice up all these tomatoes and then I'll open up the cheese. I also have a ball of burrata cheese to use. These are a couple tomatoes from our garden, so figured I would throw those in too. That one's a little underripe, so we're going to leave him out. And using a serrated knife to cut your tomatoes is always the best option because it will cut through the tomatoes without crushing them or mushing them. So you want like a sharp serrated knife, and I love this one. It's very easy to use. The other serrated knives I have in the house are bread knives, and bread knives aren't going to be as easy to use to cut a tomato. So we are going to stick with the serrated for this. And I think we might leave that one out. That one looks a little dried out. So all right, so those are our tomatoes. Now I am going to arrange our platters. So what I like to do is lay out the tomatoes with a little space in between them in sort of a circle, I guess. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. You could make little stacks, but I feel like a spiral is the prettiest. Then I am going to open up one of our mozzarellas. Now these are a sliced fresh mozzarella, so I did not have to do any of the work here. I'm gonna let my honey open those up for me because my hands are wet and I can't do it. Ah, excellent. I have an excellent helper. Okay. Whoop. Still having difficulty. Okay, and so these are pre-sliced cheese, so what I'm gonna do is just alternate. So tomato, cheese, and I'm going to keep going all the way around. And if I have to make like another ring around, you know, like and move some of these out of the way, I can do that. Okay, so got another thing of cheese open. And I bought this fresh mozzarella at BJ's, so I got like a huge pack of it for a very affordable price. All right, and now we'll just start another ring in the center. See, so I will and I basically just keep going until I run out of either cheese or tomatoes, one or the other. And I think that is close enough. Now I do have a ball of burrata here also that I want to use. So I am going to just kind of break this open and set it in the center, because the center of burrata is really creamy and delicious. So that looks pretty. And then, like I said, I do have some little extra bits of tomato here that are perfectly fine. So I'll sort of sneak them in. It doesn't have to be perfectly, you know, every other or whatever. But there. So good enough. And then I'm going to now dress this. So I made homemade basil oil. What I did was I took some fresh basil and I blanched it in boiling water for about 30 seconds, pulled it out, put it in my blender with some extra virgin olive oil, and then blended it together and strained it. I strained out all the little bits of basil. So now I just have a homemade basil oil. What I do with this is I cover the top with saran and then put the lid on, and then I put it in my fridge, and it will be good for months. And then when you want to use it, you just take it out of your fridge and you put it in a bowl of warm water and let it liquefy, because it will solidify in your fridge. And then when you want to use it, you've got a really great olive oil that tastes just like basil. So I'm just going to kind of generously dress this. And then this is a balsamic glaze, and this is a really good contrast on the tomatoes. So I just kind of zigzag that over the tomatoes as well. And then I'm going to salt and pepper. And tomatoes and mozzarella are sort of bland in flavor, so you do want to salt them generously. And of course, everybody can add additional salt on their plate if they wish. And then I am just going to take a little bit of fresh basil here and use that to garnish. I tend to be like the person that puts way too much basil on everything. Like if you ask the people in my house, they will say that when I chop up basil and put it on something, that literally you get more basil than you get the ingredients. But I'm going to keep this really simple tonight, and that is caprese salad. Okay, so this is one of our favorite appetizers. I'm going to show you how we put it together. So this is a block of cream cheese and then homemade hot pepper jelly. And all we do is dump the hot pepper jelly on top. Usually it takes about a half a jar, sometimes more. And then you serve this with Clubhouse crackers. You can certainly buy the name brand club crackers if you want, but these are just as good. And all you do is scoop some of this up with a spoon and put it on the cracker, and it is a great appetizer. So at this point, our guests had arrived. They were mingling, talking, enjoying some drinks, and I was getting the rest of the appetizers prepped. So at this point, you're going to get voiceover Stacy so that I can explain to you what I was doing. So I just set up a simple veggie tray here, picked up some already cut up and clean veggies from the store for convenience. With all of the work and cooking I had been doing that day, I was taking some convenience and being very happy about the whole thing. So I just did some chopped up cucumbers, peppers, cauliflower, carrots, celery, tomatoes, and oh, hello, Ellie. Our puppy's visiting. And this is a ranch dip that I put in the center of the tray. It's nice to have something fresh like fruit or veggies when you have guests. It's a good idea to do something fresh and light when a lot of the other dishes you're serving might be heavier or contain meat or cheese. This is a nice option if somebody just wanted something simple to snack on. So now I'm setting up a charcuterie board. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I'm just showing you the assortment of cheeses and meats that I purchased. Most of these items were purchased at Aldi. Some of these cracker assortments and things were purchased at Trader Joe's. And so in this part of the video, I'm just trying to set up how I want my charcuterie to look. So what I'll do is I'll take my cheeses, some of my little serving dishes, and I'll just sort of put them on the board and see if I like it. And so at this point, I just did like the round cheeses in opposite corners, and then more like square or rectangle cheeses in opposite corners, and then the log cheeses in opposite sides. And then I put some dishes in the center. and was pretty happy with that. I had some fig jam there. That's going to go in one of the dishes later. And now I'm going to start slicing up the cheeses. When you slice up cheeses for charcuterie, you want each cheese to be a bite-sized piece. Um, and they can be different shapes. They can certainly be triangles or squares, but you want the cheese to be bite size or maybe 2 bites. You don't want enormous pieces of cheese. I used to put a whole piece of cheese on my charcuterie board with a knife, thinking that people would take the knife and they would cut off the piece of cheese that they wanted. But I found that they never actually did that. The cheese would just sit there. And unless I actually cut it up into bite sized pieces, it just didn't get touched. And so moving forward, I decided to always make sure to cut up the cheese, and more of it gets eaten if you do that. So I just took the brie and cut it into halves and then quarters, and then each quarter into 4 pieces, and then put it back on the board. And this is, again, a nice way to make sure that your cheese gets eaten if it's easily accessible and people can just grab it. I try to have a soft cheese on the board. I also get a smoked cheese, some sort of cheddar, some sort of soft cheese like a goat cheese. Um, Also, maybe like a cheese log, like is pictured here. It's sort of like a cheddar log with some almonds on it. Any kind of cheese that you like and that you know your guests would like is good, but I like to just have a little bit of an assortment. So, like a brie, a smoked cheese, a cheddar, some sort of flavored cheese, something maybe that's sweet, and then another savory cheese that's a spreadable consistency. You can also use those Boursin cheeses. They come in like little containers and they're spreadable. Those are good as well. And we also did have our cream cheese and pepper jelly on the side as well, and people enjoyed that. So here I'm just opening up our log cheeses and getting them on the board. It's great to have a couple of knives and a pair of scissors with you when you are making a charcuterie board. You'll definitely need it. And although sometimes your packages will have like a little pull tab on them, it is sometimes hard to get a good grip on that little pull tab, especially on cheeses, and especially if your hands might be wet from washing them in between touching the cheese. It's difficult sometimes to be able to open the packages easily, so it's nice to have a pair of scissors handy. And then this other round piece of cheese is a smoked Gouda. It was an applewood smoked Gouda that I got at Aldi. You could also get like a smoked provolone instead. I just like to have a mixture of different flavors and textures when it comes to the cheese on the board. And I find once you get the cheese on the board in the area where you like to have it or where it looks most pleasing, then it's very easy to get your other elements in place around it. The key to our charcuterie board is to fill it up. You really just want as much stuff on the board as possible. You don't want to leave open gaps. If you fill up the board as much as possible, you'll find that it looks the most pleasing to the eye. If you just plop down cheese in some areas and meat in some areas and you don't fill in the blank space, it's not going to look as nice. So it's much better to have a lot of stuff on the cheese board, almost have it sort of overflowing with stuff, than it is to have too little. So again, I cut this cheese the same way I did the brie, which was just into halves, quarters, and then each quarter into 4 pieces. And then I like to take a piece of the cheese and sort of set it on top. That way people know that it is cut and then they can just grab it and start eating it. I did get some little serving tongs on Amazon, and I have like little serving forks as well. I'll link those in the description for you, but they're great to have on a charcuterie board. People sometimes don't feel right touching things with their fingers, especially when it's something that a group of people are sharing. So it's good to have utensils that they can use when they're grabbing the items that they wish to eat off the board. So now I'm just taking one of the serving forks and I'm breaking up the cheddar. This is an aged cheddar that I got from Aldi, and it's nice and crumbly. And so rather than trying to cut it into perfect little squares or something like that, I decided just to break it up with the fork. And then there were a couple of bigger pieces, which I then just kind of broke up with my hands. But this was a very, very good, very sharp, dry cheddar, and it went very well with the other items on the board. When you're making a charcuterie board, in addition to your meats and cheeses, you want to have nuts, fruits, crackers. You can do little breadsticks, jams, honey. Those items are all very complementary to each other. You can even use dried fruit. In this board, I'll be using some dried cherries, but you can also use dried apricots or figs. Anything like that is going to be very tasty. So this is a jar of fig jam that I got at Wegmans, I believe, and I'm just scooping some of that into the dish and then leaving the little spoon there so that people can help themselves. And this is a aged balsamic cipollini onion cheese that I opened and then decided, oh wait, I'll put the honey on the board next. So this is honeycomb that came in a jar of honey. I got this at Aldi, and so I just put the honeycomb in the dish and then added a little bit of the honey around it. And then I cut up the aged balsamic and cipollini onion cheese. This is a really delicious cheese. I believe it's a Belgioioso, if I'm saying that correctly, brand cheese, and it is really tasty. It's a drier cheese, so similar in texture to the cheddar, and it has a really good flavor. And it's one of our favorites. We love this cheese. Um, and so anytime we do a cheese board, I'll try to make sure to get a block of this. This we found at Wegmans. You can also get it in larger chunks at Restaurant Depot. And this I just cut down the middle to cut the wedge of cheese in half. And then I ended up just kind of cutting them into cubes, I guess. And at the one end, the cubes were very small, and at the other end, they were big, and that's fine. That allowed people to decide if they wanted a smaller bite or a bigger bite. But generally, like I said, all pieces of the cheese were approximately a bite or two. So these were a dried cherry that I got at Aldi, and those are going in that little container or dish. And I'll link these dishes and things in the description for you if you'd like to purchase them for your charcuterie board. Now, these were some Marcona almonds. They were a truffle salt flavored Marcona almond that I got at Trader Joe's. They're so delicious. The Marcona almonds are so tasty and they're so different from a regular almond. So I encourage you to try them because they are so good. It's also good to have something like an olive or maybe a pickled pepper on your board. These are blue cheese stuffed olives. And so rather than get a hunk of blue cheese, I find people don't really love eating a big hunk of blue cheese, but they will eat a blue cheese stuffed olive. So these were from Aldi, and then I just filled up a dish with those. Next, I got the meats on the board. The prosciutto is something I usually put near the brie. I find that brie and prosciutto go really well together, and also with the fig jam on a cracker, it's really tasty. So I sort of set up the board to encourage people to eat things that go together very well. I find if the brie, the prosciutto, and the fig jam are in the same spot, people are more likely to grab it or try it. And so I group things together that would taste good together. So all I'm doing with the prosciutto is sort of gathering it into a little bit of a ball. It almost looks like a little rose. I'm not folding it in a special way or in a fancy way or in a very precise way, but if you just take your prosciutto pieces and you kind of crumple them up, then you'll end up with a nice sort of little prosciutto rose sort of thing. And it looks very pretty. And again, it's easy for your guests to grab it and eat it if it's set up this way. If you were to just sort of set them flat on the board, they are hard to separate. there's like little pieces of plastic or paper in between each layer of the prosciutto in the package. But if you just were to set that on the board like that, it's going to be difficult for your guests to get to it. So I just kind of balled them up and set them alongside the brie, and they get eaten up very quickly. And like I said, the more you fill the board, the better it will look. So here I took some fresh green grapes. I had rinsed them in the sink with some water in the colander and let the water drain out. And then I just took my scissors and I cut the grapes into small little clusters of maybe 3 to 5 grapes per cluster. If you set up your grapes this way, then people can just grab them and eat them, or grab that little cluster, put it on their plate, and it's easier for them to eat them. If you put one big, huge cluster of grapes on the board, people are going to be sitting there trying to pull the grapes off of the cluster, and it's time consuming. It kind of they're standing there for a while. Other people might be maybe wanting to grab some charcuterie and now they can't because somebody is sitting there trying to grab some grapes and having trouble. So I find that if you put like small clusters of grapes on the board, then people will just pick up and grab that cluster and take it with them. And it's very convenient. And again, it's all about making the board inviting for people, and it's about making them grab a small amount of everything and then kind of move on. They can always come back and graze again. They can always eat more, but this way they're taking a small amount. And if they don't like something, it's okay. It's not going to, go to waste. But this is nice because they grab their amount of their food that they want and then they move on. I also washed some strawberries and put them on the board. They looked really nice by the cheddar. I left the little green stem on them. You could certainly have taken that out of the strawberry if you wish, or even maybe cut them in half, but I just decided to leave them whole and put them on the board. And they did get eaten up. I think we only had a couple of strawberries left at the end of the night. And I did refill them at one point because they did disappear. And then the last thing that I did for the board itself was the salami. Um, you can do all sorts of fancy things with different meats on your board. You can make salami roses and flowers. I've seen tutorials on YouTube where you can take a wine glass or a champagne glass and you can fold the salami around the edge of it and then pull it out and it's like a rose. I've done that before. And what I find is if you have these beautiful salami roses on your board and they're sitting there perfectly, people don't tend to touch them because they don't want to disturb them. And so it's not about it all being so perfect and aesthetically pleasing. You really do want your guests to be able to eat up everything. The worst thing would be to spend time and money on an appetizer for people that then they don't eat because it's too perfect or it's too pretty and they're just afraid to touch it. So instead, with the salami, I take each piece of salami, fold it in half, then fold it in quarters, and then I just stack them like you can see here in my hand. I hold them until I have a bunch of them, and then I just kind of shove that little bunch of salami folded pieces, I guess, for lack of a better word, onto the board. So here is the finished charcuterie board. My camera battery had died at one point, so I wasn't able to show you those last couple of steps, but it came out really nice. I was really pleased with it. Also, I keep my crackers on the side. I put them like in a basket to the side of the charcuterie board. I know some people do incorporate the crackers onto the board, but I find sometimes when they sit near the fruits and the meats and the cheeses, they'll get a little soggy. So I like to keep them on the side, but I wanted to show you some of the other appetizers. Everybody really had a great time and really enjoyed the day. Thanks so much for joining me, keeping me company while I made all of these appetizers for our friends and family. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.